Hello, hello, hello. So I'm going to do a little, hopefully less than 10-minute overview of the book club book, Microlearning Short and Sweet. So we read this for our November book club read, and we had a really good Zoom chat at the end with the author. So we went really, really deep, and it's a fascinating conversation. So it's like an hour long. So I've shared that's already on YouTube or in our Facebook group. But I thought it would be helpful to some of our viewers to do a mini micro version as well, because there were some really good key points. And I did create a really nice infographic, which I'll be using just now to talk through, to show you some of the points. And if you want a copy of the infographic, it's in our Facebook group, the Learning and Development Hub. So anyway, the book was Microlearning Short and Sweet, author Robyn A Defelice. Yeah, as I say, she joined our Zoom chat when we reviewed the book, which is amazing. I actually felt like that when I read the book, I got a lot from it, but when we had that conversation, it took it to another whole level. So these things all have layers. So what I would say about the book, first of all, one, it's small, it's really handy size. The print's a little bit small, so I did have to wear my glasses. And you can see I've marked it up. Obviously, with this kind of book, there's a lot of technical stuff in there. So it's not like a story book, it's not full of motivational stories. However, the examples and the case studies that were shared, I did find incredibly motivational. And I actually, all the way through, I was applying what I was learning to training programs and learning programs that I'm developing now. All of it, I was like, wow, I can do this, and wow, I can do that. So if you invest the time into sitting down and reading this book, you will be able to apply things straight away, I have no doubt. And actually, I would go so far as to say that if you are in learning and development in any way, shape or form, if you're developing programs or courses, trying to impart knowledge, skills and behavior changes to people, then I would go as far to say this should be an essential read, because it is not just about micro-learning. It's because micro-learning is part of learning. And I think that was a really important principle, that it's not about something that's an add-on or a gimmick. Robyn, the author, pulls on all the kind of learning theories that underpin good learning practice. So by reading this book, actually, you're getting a great overview into what good learning practice and learning design should look like. So that was really, really helpful, because there's so many theories out there, there's so many models, but to have it all put in one place in a nice sort of handy intro chapter at the beginning was so helpful. So I think this should be on your recommended reading list. So I'm going to screen share and just take you through some of the key points that I liked. Now I've got to move my thing out of the way here. Slideshow. Here we go. So yeah, as I said, book's called Microlearning Short and Sweet. So the first thing that really jumped out to me is the four key questions to consider if you are implementing microlearning. So it's being really clear up front, what is the purpose? And there's 4 different things. So is it going to supplement the current training? Meaning, is it going to add to it and give a bit of extra? Is it going to reinforce the content by just making something maybe more meaningful or giving it more context? Is it going to augment the current learning materials? So maybe allow people to do some skills practice of something that they've learned? Or is it to remediate poor or incorrect performance and behaviours? So there's 4 different purposes, and it's being very, very clear on what the purpose is for any particular instance. So the other thing that I liked was these 6 use cases, and I really liked these a lot. So I don't know how she did it, but she came up with 6 that all begin with P. So she wins a prize for that, first of all. Now, some of these, it was really interesting because reading this, some of these I'm like, well, that's what I've used before, that's what I've done. So things like preparatory, the last one, you know, I've often done learning events, you know, if you've got a conference, you've got a load of leaders, taking them away, you want to get them in the right mindset, you want them thinking about the things that you're going to talk about on the day, then you do some preparatory drip feeding, sending out some emails, sending out some reading, sending out some questions to think about. So I've used the preparatory use case. I've used post instruction. So if you've done a big learning event and then you're trying to just keep it topped up, keep people thinking, keep them in the zone, then that's another good one. Performance, I'm working through these backwards. Performance, I think most of us have probably seen performance microlearning. So, you know, if you're using a piece of software and you get a little prompt saying, if you do this, here's a shortcut. So we see lots of those around. Practice, yeah, that's another good one. Well, they're all good. Persuasive, modifies the behavior of the learner and is usually goal-oriented. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'd have to really think hard to think of examples of that. But the one that I really loved that I'd never thought about too much was PENSIVE. So getting the learner to think through, reflect, or brainstorm an idea or concept. And maybe I have used it. And I think this is where it was interesting. What this book made me realize is things that I have done that I hadn't considered or called or classed as microlearning in my head, but they kind of were. So that was helpful in a way. But I really liked just the use of that word PENSIVE, because it's not a word we use that often, but it shows that it's valid and important as a you know, a method of learning. Sometimes people have to think about things. Sometimes they have to reflect. Sometimes they have to brainstorm, and that is as valuable, that thinking is as valuable, and in many times more valuable than just serving up a piece of content. So it kind of, for me, was turning on its head what microlearning is. You know, we often think about content being pushed out, but it's not always that, doesn't have to be that. Getting people to think can be the thing. So this was something I really liked, and I wished I could show you the whole picture here, but you'd have to get the book to see that. So I just have to move my screen, that's it. A microlearning map. So she calls it a map, but actually it's more of a table. But it's those headings that are really, really important. And it was this table that's used to work out what the correct learning method is for the particular task that you have. So if you imagine all those headings along the top, and then just underneath, so for task, you have what it is, what the thing is that you want people to do at the end of the training, what you want them to know, what you want them to be able to do, that kind of thing. And we're all familiar with that because that's standard learning objectives. And so for that task or that thing, you write down what are the exact performance criteria, what's the overall objective, and then this was a really interesting one. What's the motivational element? You know, why are people going to want to do this? What's going to motivate them? And that was quite important. I've never really thought, well, I think this is the other thing. Some of these things, I think if you've been designing training for a long time, they're just kind of a little bit just natural. You just kind of, they're intuitive. You kind of intuitively think, well, a quiz is going to work at this time, or having a discussion with a group of colleagues is going to work, whatever, you know intuitively what's going to work. But the thing with microlearning, if you're designing something that's meant to be very intense, but very small, it has to be designed really, really well. So understanding and articulating specific things like the motivational element, rather than just relying on your gut feel, is really, really important. So when you've got all those things, the task, performance criteria, objective, motivational element, then you can identify what is the best microlearning method. And there's some lovely examples in the book of that. So if you get the book, you'll see exactly what I mean there. Okay, so here we have the 3 essential components of your microlearning strategy. So first of all, let's just pause on that word strategy. So if you're implementing any kind of microlearning, then you do need to have a strategic approach and not just think of it, again, as I've said before, content that you push out. So it's a bigger strategy, mapping the performance to the task, determining the use case, like we've just talked about, and really understanding this idea of motivational strategies. And this, I thought this was a really good point, that it says there, the short duration of seat time of microlearning. And I just thought, oh, that's just genius, isn't it? If you've only got people's attention for a short burst, then you have to do something that's going to engage them really, really well. And I just thought that was a nice phrase, not really thought about it that way before. And then you've got to think about how you're going to deliver your microlearning products. Is it going to be an automated email campaign? Is it going to be a video on demand? What is it that you're going to do? Another area that was covered a lot in the book, probably even a whole chapter on it actually, and that was evaluation. Create an evaluation plan for your microlearning from the beginning. So again, good fundamentals of learning design, learning practice. You need to know from the outset what it is you're measuring and how you're going to measure it, so you can build it into the process. And this other point that I really liked, make sure you evaluate the process as well as the outcomes, because if you're building something really technical, maybe it's a piece of e-learning, piece of digital content, that's very labor intensive and very expensive in terms of time and money. So understanding what worked in the process. Did you have to involve lots of stakeholders? Did you have to have lots of meetings? Were there critical sign-off points? How did that all go? Because that's really important, because if you're going to iterate and do something else again, then you want to know what worked out of the process. So I thought that was a really nice point. So from the book club chat that we had on Zoom, a few things came up in discussion. So here's our nuggets from that conversation. And this first one I know was my point, but yeah, just that microlearning is a methodology more so than just micro content. It's actually a way of thinking. And just because it's micro, it doesn't mean it's rapid to develop. It can probably take longer than a piece of standard learning. Interviewing your stakeholders for what the potential needs to be, the purpose, and understanding things like the company culture. That came up in a conversation around if you're external to the organization. So if you're an instructional designer, for instance, and you're designing for a company that you don't actually work there, then you need to have those insights of what's going to work. Are they going to like quizzes? Are they going to like games? What's the culture? What have they had before? So understanding some of those things. Active listening, key skill to really draw out from your stakeholders and customers what it is they're looking for. Change management, yeah, really important, this one. Any implementation is, you need to have a change management approach. But this was really majored, and I thought this was a great point. I think particularly if you're implementing something brand new that hasn't been done before, so a whole new process. So say you're implementing some digital content that's not happened in that organization before, then it's very high risk. It's very high risk. So you have to take a whole change management process, like how are we going to engage our stakeholders? Why are people going to do this? What work do we have to do up front to shift them from being open to this? So lots of thinking around change management needed. The future. So yeah, we talked about the differences between pull and push microlearning, which is covered in the book. Definitely there was a feeling that, pull microlearning could be the way of the future. So people wanting to do things, getting drawn in to games, for example, because, gamification, they can score, they can win, just the motivational elements rather than content being pushed to people and you have to do this or you have to watch this month. which sounds a bit dull, doesn't it? So making people want to do things on demand when it suits them. And last point, last nugget, was building intentionality into the design predicated by the use cases. So really understanding the use cases and designing around them. So they were the things that we shared. There is an infographic with all of that information on. And also there was a load of extra reading, recommended reading, which came from Robyn herself, which is in the L&D Book Club, which is my Facebook group. So please join us if you're a people professional, and you can get the infographic and see the full video as well. Okay, lovely to have you.